Lyra moved quietly through the corridors of Kalara Station, her feet making no sound on the smooth metal floors. The lights above reflected softly in her silver blue eyes, giving them a glow that made her seem almost unreal. She was small, delicate, and yet there was something about her presence that drew attention. Even if no one wanted to admit it, students from different planets passed her by, talking loudly in their own languages, laughing, exchanging gestures, and sharing small jokes that she never joined. But Lyra did not seem sad. She simply observed, her gaze calm and steady, her posture straight, and her hands folded neatly in front of her. No one really knew much about her. She had arrived at Kalara Station several months ago, and in that time, she had never spoken a word. Not once. Teachers tried to communicate with her, and some of the students attempted to get her to join in activities, but she never replied. Some whispered that she was shy. Others speculated that she was hiding some secret. Rumors quickly spread that Lyra could understand everything, but chose silence as her armor. The more people talked about her, the more distant she seemed to become, as if the noise around her was just a blur of colors and shapes. Nothing worth acknowledging. Ethan, a human cadet, had noticed her from the day she arrived. Humans were considered a minor presence in the academy, a species that was newer to interstellar exploration than many others, and often underestimated. But Ethan had a natural curiosity, one that had brought him to Kalara Station in the first place. He had always noticed details that others ignored. The way a sensor glowed differently when a system was under stress, or how alien biology adapted to artificial gravity in strange ways. And Lyra was a detail he could not ignore. He first saw her during a morning simulation in the central training hall. The hall was vast, with gravity slightly lighter than Earth's, allowing cadets to jump higher and move faster than they could on their home worlds. Students darted around, some piloting small drones, others practicing hand-to-hand maneuvers. Lyra stood in a corner, untouched by the chaos, observing everything with calm eyes. Her movements were slow but deliberate, and there was a rhythm to the way she shifted her weight, almost like she could predict what everyone else would do next. Ethan had been impressed by many cadets during his time here. But Lyra was different. She seemed to belong to the room without being a part of it. A presence that demanded attention despite her silence. Ethan approached cautiously. He did not want to startle her. "Lyra," he said softly, just loud enough for her to hear. The word felt strange on his tongue. He had overheard her name from one of the instructors, a teacher who spoke of her in hushed tones. Something about speaking it aloud felt daring. For a moment, nothing happened. Lyra did not turn, did not blink, did not even breathe differently. And then, very slowly, she shifted her gaze. Her silver blue eyes met his, and for the first time, they seemed to acknowledge him directly. It was subtle, a tiny flicker of surprise, but it was enough. Ethan felt his heart skip. He had expected nothing, yet something had changed. After that, he found himself looking for her wherever he went. He noticed how she moved through the academy's gardens, how she paused to watch the tiny artificial birds that flew in the airstreams, and how she studied the stars visible through the wide windows. She seemed almost unaware of the students around her, absorbed in the world in a way that was hard to understand. Ethan tried simple gestures. He would wave, smile, or mimic small movements to see if she would respond. At first, she did nothing. Then, gradually, she started to acknowledge him with tiny nods, or by tilting her head. There was no spoken word, but it felt like a conversation in a language only they were beginning to understand. Other cadets noticed the change too. Some whispered that Ethan had found a way to break her silence, though no one could say how. Lyra continued to avoid most interactions. But around him, her reactions were different. There was curiosity there, a flicker of something that suggested she was beginning to trust him. One evening, Ethan found her alone in the Academy's observatory. The room was filled with telescopes and sensors, all pointed toward distant stars. Lyra sat cross-legged on the floor, her gaze fixed on a cluster of lights that shimmered faintly in the distance. Ethan stepped carefully into the room. "You like looking at them?" he said softly. Lyra did not reply. but her eyes shifted toward him. He noticed a small smile, almost imperceptible, tugging at the corners of her lips. He realized then that she had been listening all along, even if she had never spoken. They spent hours that evening moving quietly among the telescopes. Ethan pointed out constellations, and Lyra responded with small gestures, moving her fingers to indicate shapes in the sky that humans could not see. It was not a conversation in words, but it was a connection, one that felt strong and fragile all at once. Days turned into weeks, and their bond grew. Lyra began to show more confidence around him, exploring areas of the station she had previously avoided. She learned to manipulate small holographic displays, interacting with the technology as if it were an extension of herself. Ethan began to notice that she had an almost supernatural understanding of systems, from navigation controls to energy grids, as if she could see patterns that no one else could. Then came the strange incidents. Small drones began malfunctioning, wandering aimlessly, or colliding with walls. Sensors picked up faint energy fluctuations in areas that should have been empty. Some cadets whispered about a presence they could feel but not see. Lyra reacted differently than anyone else. She would pause mid-step, tilt her head, and stare at places where no one else could detect anything. Ethan watched as she reached out with her hands, not touching anything, and the air seemed to shift subtly around her. It was as if she could sense something invisible, something that humans, and even other aliens, could not perceive. One night, during a routine security check, Ethan found her standing near the edge of a high observation deck. The stars outside shimmered brilliantly, and he could see her face clearly in the soft light. "They're coming," she said, finally breaking the silence. The voice was quiet, melodic, and unlike anything Ethan had expected. He felt a shiver run down his spine. He had thought she might never speak, that her silence was permanent. Yet here she was, using words as though she had been holding them inside all along. Ethan realized that her silence was not just about shyness or fear. It was a shield, a way to protect herself from a world that did not always understand her. And yet, somehow, he had reached her. By speaking her name, by showing curiosity without judgment, he had opened a door she had kept closed for years. From that moment on, their connection deepened. Lyra began to communicate more, though still mostly through gestures and subtle expressions. Ethan noticed how she would tilt her head to indicate agreement, wave a hand to show a warning, or point at systems and objects to convey complex ideas. She was brilliant, far beyond what he had imagined, and he felt honored to be the one she allowed into her world. But the strange occurrences on the station continued. Ethan began to suspect that they were connected to Lyra in ways he could not yet understand. The energy fluctuations, the malfunctioning drones, the whispers that cadets claimed to hear Lyra, seemed to perceive them all. He watched as she moved through corridors with confidence, her senses alert, her body responding before his mind could even process the danger. It became clear that the Academy had more to worry about than ordinary training exercises. Something was stirring, something old and powerful that had been lying dormant beneath Kaelara Station. And somehow, Lyra was at the center of it. One evening, Ethan followed her to a restricted section of the station. She moved silently, almost gliding over the floor, until she reached a wall that seemed ordinary at first glance. She raised her hands, and the surface shimmered. Panels slid aside, revealing a hidden chamber filled with ancient machinery and glowing symbols. "This is incredible," Ethan whispered. Lyra's eyes met his, and for the first time, she spoke a complete sentence. "I have been waiting for someone to see this with me." Her voice was soft, but there was power in it. Power that was both human and alien, fragile and immense. Ethan realized that the quiet alien girl he had noticed months ago was not just a mystery, she was a key to something much larger, something that could change the fate of everyone on Kaelara Station. As they explored the chamber together, Ethan felt a sense of awe. Lyra manipulated the machinery with precision, activating systems that had not been touched in centuries. Lights pulsed softly, energy flowed through conduits, and symbols glowed brighter with every movement she made. It was as if she understood the language of the station itself, a language no one else could read. And through it all, Ethan knew one thing. He had discovered something rare, something extraordinary. Lyra was no ordinary cadet. She was a bridge between worlds, a link between silence and sound, between observation and action, and he had been the one to speak her name. In that moment, the vastness of space outside the observatory felt smaller, more intimate. Two beings, human and alien, standing together, beginning to understand each other in ways no one else could. The quiet girl was no longer silent, not completely. And for Ethan, that was only the beginning. The universe beyond the station was full of unknowns, threats, and possibilities. But for the first time, Ethan felt certain that with Lyra by his side, they could face whatever came next. He did not yet know the full scope of her abilities or the secrets hidden within the station. But he knew that her silence had been a choice. And now, together, they could uncover the truths it had protected. And so, Lyra and Ethan stood in the soft glow of the chamber, the hum of ancient machines around them, and the stars twinkling beyond the windows. In a world full of noise, chaos, and endless motion, they had found something rare: understanding, trust, and the beginning of a bond that might shape the future of the galaxy itself. The days following the discovery of the hidden chamber were unlike anything Kalara Station had ever experienced. Rumors of Lyra's abilities spread quietly among the students, carried by glances and whispers, though few dared speak openly. Those who knew of her new connection with Ethan watched with curiosity, trying to understand the silent bond that had begun to grow between human and Aelari. Lyra moved through the station with purpose now, no longer a drifting shadow in the corridors. She studied systems with the precision of someone who could see the heartbeat of the station itself. Ethan followed her wherever she went, learning quickly that her gestures and subtle movements conveyed more information than words ever could. She pointed at energy conduits and flicked switches with an elegance that was almost a dance, and systems that had been dormant for centuries came alive under her guidance. The strange incidents had not stopped. Small drones continued to malfunction, sensors recorded inexplicable readings, and shadows seemed to flicker in places that should have remained empty. Many cadets claimed to hear whispers, soft voices that vanished when investigated. The teachers were baffled, unsure whether these were technical anomalies or something beyond understanding. Ethan noticed that Lyra reacted differently from everyone else. She would pause mid-step, close her eyes briefly, and her hands would rise slightly, as if she could feel the currents of energy around her. Sometimes the air itself seemed to move at her command, and objects shifted subtly without physical contact. It was clear that her species had abilities humans could not fully comprehend, and Ethan realized that her silence had been more than an absence of words. It had been a tool, sharpening senses that most beings did not even know existed. One morning, Ethan found Lyra in the observation gardens. The garden was a large enclosed space, with artificial sunlight and flowing streams. Exotic plants from across the galaxy grew there, and small creatures, some mechanical, some living, wandered among the paths. Lyra knelt beside one of the streams, her hands hovering above the water without touching it. The surface rippled as if responding to her presence. "Lyra," Ethan said softly, stepping closer. "Do you feel it?" Her eyes opened slowly, and she looked at him with the same intensity he had seen before. Then, she raised her hand slightly and nodded. Ethan leaned closer, observing carefully. The water moved in patterns, forming shapes that resembled symbols, some he had seen in the hidden chamber. It was clear that Lyra was communicating something, though the meaning was still beyond his understanding. Over the next few days, Ethan made it his mission to learn as much as he could from her. He studied the symbols, copied them into his datapad, and tried to connect them with the anomalies around the station. Lyra responded to his efforts, guiding him with subtle nods, tilts of her head, and small movements of her hands. Slowly, he began to see patterns emerge. The disturbances, the flickering shadows, and the malfunctions were not random. They were linked to energy flows that Lyra could sense and influence. One evening, as the station's gravity shifted to its night mode, Ethan and Lyra walked through the maintenance corridors. The air hummed faintly, and the lights flickered in irregular patterns. Lyra paused, placing a hand against the wall. The hum intensified, and a faint glow appeared beneath her fingertips. Ethan realized she was detecting a hidden current of energy, one that the station's sensors had failed to register. "This is different," he whispered. "You're sensing something the systems can't." Lyra tilted her head, then gestured toward a vent in the ceiling. Ethan looked up and saw a faint shimmer, barely noticeable. "What is it?" he asked. Lyra's eyes met his. She pointed at the vent, then made a sweeping motion with her hands, as if to say, "Follow me." Together, they moved carefully, avoiding detection from the security drones patrolling the hallways. When they reached the vent, Lyra touched a small panel, and it slid open silently. Inside, Ethan could see wires and conduits that were glowing faintly, as if energized by an unseen force. "This energy, it's alive," Ethan whispered. "Awed. It's moving on its own." Lyra nodded, her eyes focused on the flow. She raised her hands again, and the energy responded, shifting and aligning in ways that seemed deliberate. Ethan realized that the disturbances affecting the station were not accidental. Something, or someone, was manipulating the energy, and Lyra could sense it in a way that no machine could detect. The following days were filled with training and discovery. Lyra taught Ethan to pay attention to subtleties others ignored. The way the air shifted when a system was under stress, the patterns of light that hinted at hidden currents, and the silent messages conveyed through gesture and expression. Together, they mapped areas of the station that had been overlooked for decades, uncovering hidden conduits, old security protocols, and chambers long forgotten. One afternoon, a sudden alarm blared through the station. Lights flashed red, and an urgent voice echoed in the corridors. "Unauthorized energy spike detected in Sector 7. Ethan and Lyra raced toward the sector, moving faster than the other cadets. When they arrived, they saw a small group of rogue drones, their sensors glowing red, moving erratically as if controlled by an unseen force. The station's automated systems tried to shut them down, but the drones ignored the commands, continuing their unpredictable patterns. Lyra stepped forward, her hands raised. She focused on the drones, and the air around her seemed to shimmer. Slowly, the drones began to respond, their movements aligning with her gestures. Ethan watched in awe as she guided them, controlling their actions without touching a single one. It was clear that she had a natural ability to interface with technology in a way that no human or alien had seen before. After the incident, Ethan turned to her. "How are you doing this?" he asked, both amazed and concerned. Lyra looked at him, her eyes calm but intense. "I feel their energy," she said simply. "I can guide it, but I cannot stop everything alone." Ethan nodded, understanding the weight of her words. The responsibility she carried was enormous. If she could sense and influence energy in this way, she could also detect threats before they became dangerous. He realized that her abilities, combined with human reasoning and adaptability, made them a formidable team. As the weeks passed, Ethan noticed other cadets beginning to treat Lyra differently. No longer merely the silent alien girl, she was now a respected presence. Someone whose abilities were recognized and valued, but she remained selective about whom she trusted. Only Ethan could approach her freely, speak to her, and understand the subtle language of her gestures and expressions. Their bond became a quiet strength, a partnership that grew stronger with each challenge. One evening, Lyra led Ethan to the hidden chamber again. The ancient machinery hummed softly, lights pulsing in rhythm with the energy flows she controlled. She moved with confidence, guiding him through sequences that activated long-dormant systems. Symbols glowed and shifted as if responding to her presence. Ethan realized that the chamber was not just a repository of old technology. It was a hub of energy, connected to the entire station. "They are trying to reach it," Ethan said, pointing to the glowing conduits. Lyra nodded, her eyes sharp. She raised her hands and closed her eyes, focusing. The energy around them responded, flowing smoothly, as if under her control. Ethan could feel the vibrations through the floor, through the air, and even through his own body. It was as if the station itself was alive, responding to her guidance. Suddenly, a loud clang echoed through the chamber. Ethan turned to see a figure emerging from the shadows, a human in a dark uniform, someone who did not belong to the academy. The intruder moved quickly, aiming a device at the energy conduits. "Lyra, watch out!" Ethan shouted. Lyra did not flinch. She raised her hands, and a wave of energy surged from her, intercepting the device. The intruder was thrown back, landing heavily on the floor. Ethan ran to her side, his heart racing. "Are you okay?" he asked. Lyra nodded, her expression calm. "They will not reach this place, not while I am here." Ethan realized then the full extent of what they were facing. The anomalies, the rogue drones, the whispers, these were all connected. There was a force trying to access the station's energy, and only Lyra, with her unique abilities, could stop it. He felt both fear and awe, knowing that the quiet alien girl was not only powerful, but also essential to the station's survival. From that day on, their partnership became more than curiosity and connection. It was a mission, a responsibility that neither of them could ignore. They trained together, explored the hidden areas of the station, and mapped the flow of energy that Lyra could sense. Ethan learned to trust her instincts, and she began to rely on his judgment and resourcefulness. Together, they became a team, bridging human ingenuity and alien perception in ways that no one else could replicate. The academy, once a place of routine and study, had transformed. With Lyra's guidance and Ethan's determination, they began to uncover secrets that had been buried for centuries. Energy conduits that were thought inactive hummed once more, and systems that had been dormant revealed hidden potentials. It was clear that Kalara Station was not merely a hub for learning, it was a nexus of power, and Lyra was the key to understanding it. And yet, the threats continued. Whoever or whatever was trying to manipulate the station's energy had not yet been fully revealed. The rogue drones, the whispers, and the intruder in the chamber were only the beginning. Ethan knew that they were stepping into something much larger, something that could change the fate of everyone on the station, and possibly the galaxy. But as he watched Lyra move through the corridors, her silver blue eyes glowing softly, he felt a sense of hope. She was no longer just the quiet alien girl. She was a guardian, a guide, and a partner. And for the first time, Ethan understood that humanity's true strength lay not only in technology or strategy, but in connection, trust, and the courage to reach out to those who seemed distant, silent, or different. Together, they would face whatever challenges came next, and together, they would uncover the mysteries hidden within Kalara Station. Using the unique bond between human and alien to confront dangers no one else could. The universe was vast, filled with unknowns and unimaginable threats. But with Lyra's abilities and Ethan's resolve, they had the potential to face it all. And for the first time, Ethan felt certain that the quiet alien girl who had once gone unnoticed was about to change everything. The days grew tense on Kalara Station. The energy disturbances were increasing, and the rogue faction responsible for manipulating the station's systems had become bolder. Ethan and Lyra moved through the corridors with a quiet urgency, the bond between them now unspoken but strong. Every step they took was cautious, every glance deliberate. Lyra's ability to sense energy and Ethan's human ingenuity had become the station's greatest advantage. But even they could not predict what was coming. One morning, the Academy's alarms sounded across the station. Red lights flashed violently, and the automated systems announced a breach in the northern wing. Cadets scrambled, while instructors tried to assess the situation. Ethan grabbed Lyra's hand, pulling her along as they ran toward the source. Her eyes glowed softly, calm amid the chaos, as if she already knew what they would find. When they reached the northern wing, they discovered the rogue faction's agents moving swiftly, attempting to access the station's core energy network. The agents were a mix of humanoids and robotic constructs, highly trained and armed with advanced technology. The sight made Ethan's heart race, but Lyra stepped forward without hesitation. She raised her hands, focusing on the energy currents around her. The robots froze mid-step, caught in the invisible field she controlled. Their weapons powered down, their movements halted. Ethan marveled at her ability to manipulate the technology without touching it. Lyra's gaze shifted to the humanoid agents. She made subtle gestures, guiding the energy flows to create barriers that forced them to retreat. Ethan followed her lead, coordinating with cadets to block escape routes and secure the area. Together, they moved as one, human and alien. Their actions synchronized, despite the lack of words. During the confrontation, one of the rogue agents activated a device that sent a pulse through the station, disrupting the energy fields Lyra controlled. For the first time, she faltered. The drones and automated systems she had guided began to malfunction again, and the threat of disaster surged through the northern wing. Ethan acted quickly. He shouted instructions to cadets, directing them to stabilize critical systems, while Lyra refocused her powers. Together, they countered the pulse, and the rogue faction was forced to withdraw. After the incident, Ethan and Lyra retreated to the hidden chamber to assess the damage. The ancient machinery hummed softly, almost as if reassuring them. Lyra moved among the panels and conduits, her hands tracing patterns that seemed to resonate with the station itself. Ethan observed closely, noting how she could manipulate complex systems with ease. "You saved the northern wing," he said quietly. "But they'll be back." Lyra nodded, her eyes thoughtful. "They will not give up easily. The station holds something they want, something they cannot take without me." Ethan felt the weight of her words. He had known Lyra was special, but now it was clear that the rogue faction had been targeting her all along. Her silence, once seen as a weakness, had been a form of protection. Her abilities were not just unusual, they were vital. The following days were filled with preparation. Ethan and Lyra trained tirelessly, combining human tactics with her unique perception of energy. They mapped hidden conduits, reinforced security systems, and coordinated with cadets from various species. Lyra taught Ethan to notice subtle shifts in energy, to read patterns invisible to the naked eye, and to anticipate danger before it arrived. In return, Ethan shared his knowledge of strategy, improvisation, and quick thinking, skills that no automated system could replicate. One evening, while reviewing energy maps, Lyra paused, her eyes focused on a section of the station that had previously appeared inactive. Ethan followed her gaze, noticing a faint pulse of light beneath the floor. "They're building something," she said softly, her voice measured. "Something that will threaten the entire station if we do not stop it." Ethan nodded. "Then we need to move before it's too late." They gathered a small team of trusted cadets and made their way to the hidden location. The passageways were narrow and dimly lit, the air thick with tension. Lyra led the way, her senses guiding them past security measures and traps left behind by the rogue faction. Every step was deliberate, every gesture calculated. Ethan marveled at her confidence and focus, realizing that her silence had sharpened her perception in ways humans could only dream of. When they reached the chamber, they discovered a device unlike anything they had seen. It pulsed with energy, drawing from the station's core and amplifying it to dangerous levels. The rogue agents were attempting to harness it, and if they succeeded, the consequences could be catastrophic. Lyra moved forward, raising her hands. The energy around the device responded, shifting and twisting under her control. Ethan coordinated the team, securing access points and disabling secondary systems. The rogue agents struggled to maintain control, but Lyra's power was overwhelming. She guided the energy, creating barriers that forced them to retreat and destabilizing the device. Suddenly, one of the agents broke free and lunged toward the device. Ethan acted instinctively, intercepting the attack and holding the agent back. Lyra focused intently, directing a surge of energy that disarmed the remaining threats. The chamber fell silent, the rogue faction defeated, and the device neutralized. Breathing heavily, Ethan looked at Lyra. "You did it. We did it." Lyra's eyes softened, and she allowed herself a small smile. "Not alone. We are stronger together. The victory brought temporary relief. But Ethan knew the rogue faction would not give up. Their determination, combined with the knowledge of Lyra's abilities, made them dangerous adversaries. The station itself was a prize, and its energy held secrets that could change the balance of power across the galaxy. In the days that followed, Ethan and Lyra continued their work, preparing for future threats. They strengthened their bond, relying on trust and understanding rather than words. Lyra's gestures, expressions, and subtle movements conveyed complex ideas that humans struggled to articulate. Ethan learned to interpret them, and together they developed strategies that combined human creativity with her unique perception of energy. One night, as they observed the stars from the observatory, Ethan spoke quietly. "Do you ever think about what comes next? Beyond the station? Beyond the academy?" Lyra's eyes glimmered. She did not answer immediately, but her gaze swept across the stars, taking in their distant light. Then, she raised a hand, pointing toward a cluster of stars far away. Ethan understood. She was thinking of the wider universe, of possibilities and challenges beyond Kalara Station. "We'll face it," he said softly. Together. Lyra's small nod was affirmation enough. In that moment, Ethan realized that her silence had never been a barrier. It had been a bridge, connecting them in ways that transcended language. Her abilities, her perception, and her quiet strength had opened a new path. Not just for them, but for the future of the station and everyone within it. The rogue faction's threat loomed, but for the first time, Ethan felt truly confident. They had faced danger, uncovered secrets, and proven that human and alien could work together in harmony. Lyra was no longer the quiet girl who drifted through corridors unnoticed. She was a force, a guardian, and a partner who had changed everything. And as they stood together, observing the infinite stars outside the observatory, Ethan knew that this was only the beginning. The universe was vast, full of unknowns, and the challenges ahead would test them in ways they could not yet imagine. But with trust, courage, and the bond they had forged, he believed they could face anything. Lyra turned to him, her eyes reflecting the distant lights of the galaxy. She raised her hand in a gesture that spoke volumes: readiness, determination, and the silent promise of unity. Ethan mirrored the gesture. And for a moment, the chaos of the universe felt distant, replaced by a quiet certainty. No matter what came next, they would face it together. Humans and Ailari, working as one, proving that connection, understanding, and courage could overcome even the most impossible odds. Kalara Station, with all its mysteries, dangers, and ancient secrets, had become more than a hub of learning. It was a battlefield, a sanctuary, and a proving ground, and at its center stood Lyra and Ethan, ready to meet the challenges of the galaxy with hearts aligned, minds sharp, and a partnership that no force could break. For the first time, the quiet alien girl had found her voice not in words, but in action, trust, and the unwavering strength of a human who believed in her. And together, they would ensure that the station, and the galaxy beyond, would not fall to those who underestimated the power of connection between species. The tension across Kalara Station had reached a level none of the cadets had ever experienced. The rogue faction had regrouped after their last failure, and intelligence reports suggested they were preparing a full-scale assault on the station's core energy system. Ethan and Lyra moved quickly through the corridors, their steps precise and deliberate. Every cadet, instructor, and security droid was on alert. But the station felt larger, almost alive, under the weight of impending conflict. Lyra's eyes glimmered faintly in the dim light, tracking energy flows that shifted invisibly through the station. Ethan stayed close, careful not to disturb her focus. Her gestures were subtle but full of meaning, communicating danger, guidance, and strategy without a single word. He realized once more how extraordinary she was, not just in her powers, but in her perception, her patience, and her quiet determination. They reached the command hub, a wide chamber filled with holographic displays, energy conduits, and access panels that connected to the entire station. Teachers and cadets were coordinating defensive protocols, but much of the automated system had been compromised. The rogue faction had already infiltrated key access points, and the threat of catastrophic energy surges loomed. "They'll strike from multiple points," Ethan said, studying the holographic map. "We need to anticipate their moves, block their access, and protect the core." Lyra nodded, her hands rising instinctively as she connected with the station's energy currents. The hum of power shifted as she focused, rerouting flows to strengthen weak points, disabling traps that the intruders had planted, and stabilizing areas where surges threatened to cause explosions. Ethan coordinated cadets, human and alien alike, moving them efficiently through the hub to secure critical access points. Suddenly, alarms blared. Red lights flashed as the first wave of attackers breached the station's outer corridors. Ethan and Lyra raced to intercept them, moving with a precision that seemed instinctive. Lyra's hands guided the energy, creating invisible barriers that slowed the invaders' advance. Drones malfunctioned mid-flight, their systems overridden by the energy she controlled, while cadets used the openings to contain the threat. The rogue faction's leader appeared. A tall humanoid with an armored suit and advanced weaponry. He moved with calculated steps, scanning for weaknesses, aiming to reach the station's core. Ethan stepped forward, blocking his path, but Lyra raised her hands, drawing the energy currents into a shield that surrounded them. The leader struck with a pulse of energy, but it was diverted harmlessly, dissipated by the flow Lyra controlled. "You cannot win," Ethan shouted over the hum of power. Lyra's eyes met his, calm yet intense. She raised her hands higher, and the energy around them responded, shifting in complex patterns. The leader tried to disrupt the currents, sending pulses that could destroy systems, but Lyra countered every move with uncanny precision. Ethan coordinated the cadets, ensuring that no area of the hub was left unprotected. Then, a critical moment came. The rogue leader activated a device that sent a powerful energy wave through the station, threatening to destabilize the core. Ethan felt the floor vibrate beneath him as conduits sparked and lights flickered. Lyra's hands rose, and she focused with incredible intensity. The currents she controlled surged forward, intercepting the wave, guiding it harmlessly into containment channels. The leader's device short-circuited, his plan failing in an instant. The battle continued in waves. Cadets fought alongside drones and security systems, guided by Lyra's energy manipulations and Ethan's quick thinking. The rogue faction's forces were formidable, but the unity and coordination of the defenders, human and alien alike, proved stronger. Every movement, every decision, was a blend of instinct, experience, and trust. At one point, Ethan noticed a small corridor leading directly to the core chamber. A group of rogue agents had slipped past the main defenses, aiming to activate another device. He turned to Lyra, pointing urgently. Without hesitation, she followed, her focus absolute. Ethan led the way through the narrow corridor, the faint glow of her eyes illuminating the path. They reached the chamber just as the agents began tampering with the core interface. Lyra raised her hands, energy swirling visibly around her, and the air seemed to hum with power. The intruders froze, unable to move as the currents encircled them. Ethan moved quickly to deactivate the device manually, using skills he had honed in previous incidents. Together, they neutralized the threat, and the core's energy stabilized. Breathing heavily, Ethan looked at Lyra. "We did it," he said. Lyra's expression remained calm, but her eyes held something Ethan had not seen before: relief, pride, and a quiet satisfaction. "The station is safe," she said softly, her voice carrying a resonance that felt stronger than any words could convey. The rogue faction was retreating, their plans foiled. The cadets and instructors began to regroup, taking stock of the damage and securing the station's systems. Ethan and Lyra moved through the corridors, checking for remaining threats, ensuring that the energy flows were stable, and guiding the station back to equilibrium. When the chaos settled, the command hub was filled with a quiet sense of accomplishment. Cadets looked at Lyra with newfound respect, recognizing the importance of her abilities and the strength of her partnership with Ethan. Teachers spoke in hushed tones about her skill and composure, acknowledging that she had not only defended the station but also inspired everyone around her. Ethan found a moment of quiet with Lyra in the observation deck, looking out at the stars. The station, though scarred by conflict, was still intact, its systems humming steadily. "You were amazing," he said. "I don't know what we would have done without you." Lyra's eyes softened. She raised a hand, gently touching his arm, a gesture of trust and connection. "We did this together. Your presence mattered." Ethan smiled. "I guess humans can be useful after all," he said lightly, though his tone carried genuine admiration. Lyra allowed a small laugh, almost musical, that seemed to echo softly in the quiet room. It was a sound Ethan had never expected to hear from her, and it filled him with a warmth he could not describe. Her voice, once silent, now carried confidence and strength, proving that connection and trust could awaken even the most guarded hearts. The following days were a mixture of recovery and celebration. Systems were repaired, cadets were debriefed, and the station slowly returned to routine. Yet Ethan and Lyra continued to explore the hidden chambers and energy conduits, mapping every detail, learning more about the station's potential, and ensuring that no threat could rise unnoticed again. As they worked together, Ethan realized that Lyra's abilities were far beyond anything he had imagined. She could manipulate energy flows, interface with technology, and sense disturbances invisible to anyone else. But what made her truly remarkable was her understanding of connection, trust, and balance. She had taught him that power was not just strength, it was empathy, awareness, and the courage to act when it mattered most. One evening, standing on the observation deck once more, Ethan asked, "Do you ever wonder what's out there? Beyond the station, beyond the galaxy?" Lyra's eyes glimmered as she gazed at the stars. She raised a hand, pointing toward a distant cluster of light. Ethan understood without words. She was thinking of possibilities, of challenges beyond their current knowledge, and of the adventure that awaited them. "We'll face it," he said firmly. "Together." Lyra nodded, her expression resolute. "Together," she agreed. The station was safe, the rogue faction defeated, and the cadets inspired. But more importantly, Ethan and Lyra had discovered something greater than any energy network or advanced technology they had discovered. The power of partnership, the strength of trust, and the potential of human and alien working in harmony. In the weeks that followed, Kalara Station flourished. New training programs were developed, focusing on cooperation between species and the integration of abilities like Lyra's. Cadets learned not only technology and strategy, but also empathy, observation, and the subtle ways in which connection could make them stronger. Ethan and Lyra became symbols of what could be achieved when understanding and trust guided action. Lyra, once the quietest girl on the station, now walked among the cadets with confidence. Her eyes still held the calm intensity that had first drawn Ethan's attention. But there was also warmth, recognition, and a sense of belonging. She had found a voice not only through speech, but through action, insight, and the bond she shared with him. Ethan looked at her, feeling a deep sense of pride and admiration. He realized that humanity's true strength was not merely in their technology, tactics, or intelligence. It was in their curiosity, empathy, and willingness to connect with others, even those who seemed different or distant. By reaching out to Lyra, he had unlocked not just her potential, but the potential of their partnership to protect the station and inspire others. As the stars twinkled beyond the observatory windows, Ethan and Lyra stood side by side. The station hummed with quiet energy, secure and alive. Their journey was far from over. New threats, new challenges, and new discoveries awaited them in the vastness of space. But for the first time, both felt certain that whatever the universe held, they could face it together. The quiet alien girl was no longer silent. She had found her strength, her purpose, and her partner. And with Ethan by her side, the station and perhaps the galaxy was in safe hands. The universe stretched infinitely before them, full of mysteries and unknowns. Yet, in the midst of that endless expanse, There was clarity, courage, and hope. Lyra and Ethan had proven that connection, trust, and the human spirit could shine brighter than any threat. Together, they would meet the future. Confident, prepared, and unyielding. For Kalara Station, for humanity, and for all the species of the galaxy, their story had only just begun.